So after buying into all the hype around it, I decided to pick up a copy of No Man's Sky, and it was actually pretty good. I was a little wary about it not living up to everyone's expectations, but it ended up being an extremely well-built game. While I wouldn't consider it the best game of all time, it was definitely one of the better games that have been released in the past couple years. It took a path that hasn't been heavily traveled, and it did a pretty good job. You wake up next to a crashed spaceship, and it's your job to fix it while surviving everything the environment throws at you. After that, it's really up to you. The thing about No Man's Sky is that there really isn't a prevalent story, there's a lore. The different races of NPCs all have their own personal characteristics from image to attitude. The Gek are all mainly merchants, and that is made apparent through their mannerisms and dialogue. The Viking are warriors, noted by their titles and their reactions to the character approaching them. The Korvac are humanistic robots that value science and always are seen doing some sort of research and have a more formal tone to their dialogue. I mean, there's a background story about a trader with some valuable cargo that crashes into a planet and is tasked with getting off of it, only to be pulled towards getting to the center of the galaxy by some outside force. However, it's not really required to follow after you get the hyperdrive, which even then, the story is more of a bare bones tutorial than an actual story. I mean, if you really just want to hop around the universe and explore random planets, it's completely up to you. The first thing I noticed about No Man's Sky was the atmosphere of the game. While the visual fidelity wasn't really anything special besides being 1080p and 60 frames per second on a PS4, the art design was very well done. It was the perfect combination of realism and fantasy, making it stand out from all the bland space exploration games that fill up the genre. The worlds were still real enough to be believable, but were outlandish enough to make them interesting. Also, the color palette and design were well chosen, making the game look extremely different from other games, yet still tame. However, while the graphics were very well done, the game still had a couple graphical issues. First of all, the field of view was way too narrow, and it made the first couple of hours nauseating, and it still makes navigation a little challenging at times. While I might be spoiled from the ability to change the field of view in PC games, it was still just too narrow for me. However, I understand the choice because it was likely done so that the game could still maintain 60 frames per second while running at 1080p, which is understandable, but it's still annoying. Also, the effect done on rendering objects did more to point out the system's limitations than they did to hide the pop-in textures. No Man's Sky opted to ditch the blur that a lot of games have implemented in the past for a static-looking effect that looked unnatural and stuck out against the rest of the terrain. However, these concerns are more of minor personal annoyances than actual issues with the game. As for the gameplay, it was alright. Overall, it was interesting to play, but I can see where a couple things will start to get grindy as the hours tick on. A lot of people boast that the game is extremely complex, but it's more of a bunch of simple systems that are combined to create a game that's originally difficult to grasp, but it becomes extremely easy over time. The upgrade system is standard for any RPG with a crafting system. There's only one exosuit that can be upgraded to hold more items by finding an upgrade in a dropship, and has modules that provide better resistance to the environment and increase stamina or improve the jetpack. There's generic tools in the multi-tool that can be upgraded, with other multi-tools having more slots and a different combination of tools and upgrades. Ships vary in size and upgrades and can either be bought for a different setup, swapped out for a crashed ship for the resource cost of repairing it, or manually upgraded in return for having a maximum size. Upgrades need blueprints which are scattered throughout the universe for the player to find in various ways. NPCs give them out for choosing the right dialogue options, manufacturing facilities give them out when their puzzle is figured out, little dispensers on the walls will have things waiting for the player to come by and pick up. There's a couple ways to find them, but they're all along the same methods of actually finding. The resources that the blueprints require are found in the worlds, with the rarity of the elements growing in proportion to the level of the upgrade. The first upgrades are extremely easy to make, but as time goes on, they're made up of other products which require materials that are often hard to find. The system really isn't complicated, it just requires a lot of grind time to get to the higher upgrades. Natural resources are done in the same way Minecraft's are done. There's an element table that works in a way that's akin to a loot table on a raid boss, but it's used for the generation of a planet. The table provides the general abundance on the planet, but the world generator will decide the places to start clusters, then determine how many individual entities will spawn in a group and what size each one will be. There's a little bit more to it, and it's hard to guess exactly how it works without digging into the source code, but that's the basic gist of it. It makes it so that there's places that are dense with resources, like caves and little patches here and there, but there's also badlands and wastelands that barely have anything on them at all. Overall, the world generator does its job well and makes the game feel like a real planet, but isn't really anything that hasn't been done before, and it just feels like a randomly generated world. The game's holistic rarity table influences the trading system, which is also pretty standard as far as trading systems go in games. The harder it is to find a resource, the higher the unit price is. Carbon and iron are sold as scrap, but small amounts of elements like gold and aluminum can be sold for a lot of money. Looted items are worth a lot more, with things like Gek Charms coming in at 11,000 units and Atlas Stones coming in at close to 70,000 units. One of the things that makes the trading system different is that the prices from trader to trader will fluctuate around a galactic average. The percent difference is random and usually minor, but it makes shopping around from merchant to terminal a good idea if you're looking to find a good deal. Exploration in itself is pretty interesting, but it never really changes in methodology. You can fly ship around the planet and land to collect resources or check out a waypoint. There's monoliths and relics which can be used to learn words in one of the 4 languages, which is really helpful for cracking some of the NPC puzzles. Observatories, outposts, and random camps which usually have an alien hanging out in them. Manufacturing facilities and operation centers which need to be broken into and have a puzzle solved in order to be rewarded for getting the place back under control. Trading posts where a terminal and an occasional NPC is stationed with merchant ships flying in at random intervals. Drop pods that contain exosuit upgrades, and down ships that can be repaired and flown away. While there's a lot of different waypoints to explore, they get dull after tracking them down for a couple hours. The NPC puzzles are either a random draw, a best guess from context, or easy as shit once you have the languages fleshed out. The observatory puzzles are simple arithmetic problems, taking the form of a front number being wrapped around to the back in each interval, or a number being increased by a factor of n with n increasing on each interval. They're basically the math problems that teachers give students when they have a sub that can't do more than basic algebra. To make it worse, they're also the exact same every time, meaning that there's like 10 of them to choose from. Also, after a few of them, the blueprints start to overlap, which means that a lot of times you don't even get anything for solving them. The species concept is interesting, but it's also a pain in the ass sometimes. If you can find all the different creatures on a planet, the game will give you 275,000 credits for uploading your records. There's a random number of them on each planet, and they're all based off of a superclass with special characteristics, meaning that it can be either really easy or really hard to find them all. The first planet I completed, I spent 2 hours looking for a bird because they had such a little chance of showing up. Seriously, I saw that species maybe 4 times over the course of my whole time on that planet. The worst part was that the birds are hard to scan in the air and hard to hit with a laser, meaning that I had to chase them down and try to kill them, which usually didn't work out, and it was as frustrating as hell. However, since the main objective of the game is to get to the center of the galaxy, you're going to be spending most of your time finding resources for warp cells so you can hop from star system to get to the Atlas stations, and then to the galaxy center if you decide to follow the main quest line. The combat system is extremely basic, with the main concept being to point and shoot at something until it's dead. There's no critical hits or weak points in enemies, meaning that the only way to really do better is to upgrade your weapons. Fighting sentinels and creatures on planets gets to be annoying as fuck if you land on a hostile planet, because it's irritating to get randomly attacked for just trying to collect resources, especially if your planet's with a lot of hostile sentinels. There's no quick way of taking them out or anything, meaning you just have to kind of stand there and drill a gun or laser until your enemy until they die. Nothing really does enough damage to actually be a threat unless there's a lot of them chasing after you, so you really don't even have to take cover or anything. Ship to ship combat isn't really fun because most of your time is just spent figuring out where the arrows are pointing to and laying into ships from afar. The aiming system is really generous, meaning that if you just shoot in almost the right direction, your landing hits. I'd have more of a problem with it if it were the main point of the game, but there's so little fighting in the game that there isn't really an issue. In all, No Man's Sky is pretty close to the industry standard for exploration games. Outside the discovery thing and the 0.0001% chance that you find somebody in the 100 bajillion planets, it's basically just a single player space Minecraft without the major creative outlet of building. It's not that the game is nothing, but that there's a whole lot of nothing. There's a lot of star systems with planets and moons and the occasional space station, and there's a lot of resources and waypoints on those planets and moons, but they all basically contain the same thing, and there's nothing in the game that really urges you to do anything outside of the main storyline, rather than from the occasional pirate encounter. There's a lot of systems in the game too, which give you the ability to become an explorer, a pirate, or a merchant, but none of them are deep enough to actually have you fill those roles. However, if you like creating your own fun, rather than having a game make it for you, then it's not a problem. If you like the idea of having a couple things to do while you grind your way to a simple goal like playing Minecraft just to get to the end, then you're gonna have a good time. However, if you need a game to create fun for you, or you really enjoy the idea of having an open world sandbox, then you're probably going to be disappointed in No Man's Sky.